All right. Welcome to the I'm a Practicing Musician podcast, where we explore what it means to be a practicing musician from perspectives spanning music educators to famous musicians. I'm your host, Jake Douglas, and today I'm joined by Franklin Taggart. From a young age, Franklin frustrated his piano teachers by creating his own songs instead of practicing assigned pieces. I think a lot of musicians can relate to that. This creative streak would define his musical journey. That journey leapt forward when Franklin got his first guitar at age 13, which became a central part of his life as he pursued a frequently interrupted 43-year professional music career. Since 2010, Franklin has coached fellow creatives to seriously chase their dreams, drawing from his decades of experience to help them navigate the path of an artist. For more insights, visit franklintaggart.com. That is TAGGART.com and youtube.com at Franklin Taggart Coaching. This is the Practicing Musician podcast. Let's dive in. So, thanks for joining me here today, Franklin. How are you doing?
Oh, Jake, it's great to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. Doing well today. It's a beautiful day here in Colorado.
Ah, wonderful. Same here in Seattle. I'm looking forward to getting outside a little bit, going down to the beach and enjoying the rays. So we'll get there, but I'm even more so looking forward to chatting with you. And the first question I ask people in the podcast is, in your opinion or your belief, what does it mean to be a practicing musician?
Well, I can just say for me, it is that music is kind of a central activity and a central passion in my life, and it's something that has been kind of an organizing principle or a common thread from the time I was very, very young, even before I got that first guitar. Um, my mother is a concert pianist, and so I was basically listening to classical piano and her accompanying choirs and other musicians from the time that I was an infant. So music has been central in my life since I was born,
Mm.
and it has been the mainstream of my life, I will have to say.
Nice. So you grew up in a musical family. Tell me a little bit about what instruments they played and how that had an effect on your personal drive to become a musician.
Well, we all took piano lessons at one point or another. I started piano lessons when I was 4,
Mhm.
and my mom was my first teacher. And I I was never very diligent with piano. I always just liked to noodle on it. I liked to make things up. And I remember, I think I was probably in 5th grade when I finally had my last piano lesson, and they had actually hired an outside of the family teacher for me by that point.
Mm.
But my sisters, 2 of them play piano really, really well. And then I have another sister who found her muse in musical theater, and is she's a fantastic singer and actor, and she's brilliant in every way. She's the one that is the professor at University of Washington,
Okay.
and she's actually a her PhD is in number theory. So go figure.
There you go. Nice. And so, is she a music professor or math professor?
Math,
Math.
yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, they're so intrinsically linked. I was a musician starting at age 4, Suzuki flute, then went to piano, saxophone, landed on drum kit. That's what I play still daily. But, I was also very proficient, uh, in mathematics. I think
Yeah.
partially because of the music that was just given to me and my family. My whole family plays music, harp, flute, piano, drums, various things. And the music really is mathematics in real time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I love it. So what instruments you said guitar? It sounds like guitar is your primary instrument now, but you've played other instruments. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I've played guitar for since 1976. I got my first guitar when I was 13,
Nice.
and I that that was really when I found the guitar, it was over for me. I just knew that that was my instrument, and it was the thing that totally captured my imagination and that became a real central part of my identity and all of that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
When I got to college, I also played trumpet and baritone horn in middle school, high school, and college.
Mm.
And I also learned how to play electric bass at some point and started to do a little bit. That was more out of necessity because I started doing a lot of my own recording when I was in college, and
Mm.
I learned electric bass so that I could just lay down a bass track without having to wake a bass player up in the middle of the night to come over to the studio and put a track down.
Yeah.
I also learned how to play a little bit of mandolin. I was a frustrated banjo player. I wanted to learn how to play clawhammer banjo, but I found that kind of counterintuitive to playing guitar because the hand motion is opposite of what you do for the guitar. So it's a little bit weird, and I never could quite get the coordination of it.
Mm.
And I also had a similar experience learning how to play the fiddle. I love fiddle music. Fiddle music is probably, if I had to list a favorite, I love old time fiddle music and traditional Celtic fiddle music and the Canadian traditional. That's the stuff that I just really love. And
Hmm.
I always kind of wanted to play the fiddle, but I was frustrated by the fiddle. And I think part of it was my hands were a little bit weird. I could never get the fingerings quite right. And I have a good ear, but I think the thing that was frustrating is that I couldn't get my fingers to land in the right place so that they were in tune, and it used
Hmm.
to just get on my nerves. So I let the fiddle players play the fiddle. They're good at that.
Yeah, fretless. Frets without a fret is hard. My
Oh man,
daughter's
I
we're
gotta
starting
have it.
her. Yeah, we're starting my daughter on violin, and she's getting it very quickly, but I was never able to do any string instruments, let alone ones without frets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a general trajectory. Did you take lessons? Did you play music in school? Did you play with your friends? Like what'd you do during that time from when you started till through college?
Well, our mutual friend Margot, we met in band when we were both in ninth grade,
Hmm.
and I was in. I took lessons, of course, piano lessons. I took for many years. When my parents gave me my first guitar, it was a Christmas present, and
Hmm.
they gave me the guitar, and they gave me a John Denver songbook, a Mel Bay Guitar Method Book One,
Mm.
and 6 guitar lessons with a classical guitar teacher.
Nice.
And his name was Jim Dreiling, and we lived in Greeley, Colorado at the time.
Hmm.
And I took those 6 guitar lessons, and that was all that I had for quite a while. And then when I was in ninth grade, the band teacher also played a little bit of guitar, and he invited me to play in jazz band. And when I got the first jazz charts, I just was like totally lost in space because
Yeah.
those chords were foreign language to me. And
Hmm.
I remember sitting down with my mom just trying to figure out the theory of the chords and how they would be fingered on the guitar.
Yeah.
Hours and hours and hours. But he was really the next teacher that I had that could show me anything on the guitar. And other than that, I learned from other kids. I learned from other kids my age who were playing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. Jazz is a whole different world. I not played, well, I guess I did play jazz saxophone for quite a while, but I also at Harvey Mudd did the jazz improv class,
Yeah.
which was phenomenal. And Harvey Mudd, it's like MIT Harvey Mudd. So
Yeah, right.
there's a bunch of mathematicians there, and it's like, okay, this is everybody's thinking in a whole different way than most humans that you interact with. So it's
Different
phenomenal.
language.
Yeah, oh, totally different language, and the jazz there was super fun. But it's confusing because you're trying to figure out. You're not even well, especially I mean, I guess primarily in that jazz improv class, you're looking at the chord progression,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
so yeah,
you got to know the changes and you've got to understand kind of the horizontal and the vertical of the changes and how they flow to each other and how they stack. And it's like
mhm,
that's 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 where the complexity starts to get very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And one of the really interesting things is that people think of improvisation as like this is something completely unique, whereas as musicians, we understand we've traversed these paths many, many times. We're just recombining them maybe in slightly different ways than we ever have based off
Hmm.
of what the other people are doing in the moment. So can you talk maybe a little bit about your process for improvisation and how you've learned to do that over the years?
Well, the first thing that I learned was the pentatonic scale, and I ran that thing into the ground.
Yeah.
And I still probably use that more than anything else, the pentatonic and the blues scales.
Hmm.
But when I was in high school, Tommy Tedesco was a famous studio guitarist. And if anybody's seen the movie The Wrecking Crew, his son Denny was the one who directed that movie. And Tommy was really the motivation behind making that movie about those studio musicians. He put out a book for guitar players only that I found when I was in high school. And in that book, he had probably two or three things that I have used every time that I've played since. One of them was just a series of warm up exercises that
Hmm.
helped me to, have have my fingers ready to go and having my picking motion all in place. Those warm up exercises, they don't take very long, but they're very effective. So I
Hmm.
learned those warm up exercises. In addition to that, in that book, he introduced the modes, the
Yeah.
the modal scales, and my life changed with
Hmm.
that understanding. And then he also talked about triads. He
Hmm.
talked about being able to move triads up and down the neck and finding different ways to invert triads so that you could have a much more interesting chord palette.
Hmm.
There were a lot of other things in that book, but those three things were really the things that I ingested and integrated into what I was doing. They became a big part of everything that I did after that.
Oh, I mean, just with those three concepts alone, you can do almost infinite number of combinations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. One of the things that we really focus on at Practicing Musician is trying to teach that type of uh well, one of our goals is to teach the type of theory that allows musicians to be a musician,
Yeah.
which is maybe for people who don't know, a little bit of a weird thing to say, but there's so many programs that are online that are great that are going to teach you how to play a song.
Yes.
And that song, that's cool. But there's a thousand other songs that use almost that identical chord structure. So if you're not understanding the chord structure or the inversions or these things that Franklin was just talking about, then you don't understand that you can apply it in many other scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about your experience with that opening up these unlimited possibilities for you?
Sure. The first thing I'll say is that as a teacher, I taught songs first. And the reason for that is because when people learn a song, it's immediately satisfying.
Hmm.
So it's like if they spend their first lesson learning a C major scale, or if they spend their first lesson learning how to play a Green Day song, the Green Day song is probably going to be much more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So I start with the songs first, but
Hmm.
the songs provide a beautiful context for then learning theory.
Hmm.
So it's like you can take the songs and then take them apart and
Hmm.
understand, like it's the same kind of thing as if you were learning how to speak English or another language. It's like you kind of learn the sentences first. Well,
Hmm.
you learn the words and then you learn the sentences and then you kind of learn the syntax, and the more you learn, the more subtle it gets.
Hmm.
But that early learning provides the context for everything that you learn beyond it. So I
Yeah.
like to start with the song and then, like, let's say I've got one of the things that I used to do with my beginning guitar students. My favorite students are adult beginners. And the reason is that they've wanted to do this for a long time and they're
Hmm.
finally letting themselves do it. So they actually practice. So one of the things that I used to do is I would give them a song, or I would give them like six songs that used the same chords in different progressions.
Hmm.
And some of them were in the major key and some of them were in the relative minor key.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those 6 songs, I mean, within a month, they were playing those 6 songs proficiently. But
Yeah.
then we were able to have the conversation about, okay, what are the chords in this and what's the language that's being spoken here?
Mm-hmm.
What are the letters? What are the words? What are the phrases? What,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can talk about how do we start to make meaning out of these things? And
Yeah.
it's like all of a sudden light bulbs go off because they start to understand the relationships between all of those little strings that they've got on their instrument and how they work together and
Yeah.
how they make a chord and how they make different moods and things like that. And so that was the way that I taught guitar.
Mm.
That was also, I think, for me, the biggest breakthroughs came when I learned that way.
Mm-hmm.
And what was really tricky for me was that the earliest books that I used, other than the John Denver songbook, the earliest books that I used taught scales first.
Mm.
And it was nice to know scales, but it wasn't interesting.
Yeah.
And so when I finally when I finally kind of graduated into learning chord progressions and learning
Mm-hmm.
different chord fingerings, and I remember the first time that I learned bar chords. It was freaky, man. I could play any song I wanted to, up and down the neck all day long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like all of a sudden the guitar became, uh, I don't know, just a much more interesting and diverse kind of an instrument because I was out of those basic chords now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to learn jazz chords, and everything changed again,
Yeah.
you know.
No,
So I,
well, it's pretty phenomenal experience to go through that those different levels of experience. Each time that I hit a different plateau, or rather maybe burst through the plateau that I've been on and I start climbing again, it's like, oh, whoa.
yeah,
Whole new world has opened up. And you're talking about this from a standpoint of like learning English as an adult. But when
right,
we're looking, I studied psychology at the Claremont colleges, and when we're looking even at kids learning English, we're not like putting an A in front of them. We're not putting a word in front of them. No, they're hearing us speak for years before
yeah,
they even start babbling, right? There's very clearly defined developmental stages that happen at approximately the same age uh, in every human, and we have to go through those, and that's happening without us even trying. That's just how it
yeah,
works. So it's good to model like your model is the teaching any subject, but especially something that's auditory like music off of something like language and how it
yeah.
naturally.
Well, I feel
Um,
like that music is just it's a different kind of language, but it is a form of communication.
oh yeah.
So when you look at the commonalities, there are many. The other thing that's really interesting is like you mentioned, like hearing language first. What's really intriguing to me is the idea of before we are born, when we're in utero, we
Mhm.
are feeling, we are sensing the vibrations of language and sound and music, and it's a physical experience, not just oral.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I am very interested in is the idea of the things that we experienced in utero may be things that we actually find some resonance with once we're born and in the world. And
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by that idea as to how does that shape our taste in music and how does that shape our ability to communicate?
Mhm.
Because that vibration is everything, you know,
Yeah.
and everything else is just kind of a subtle innovation of the vibration, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I wrote a song that I would sing to my daughter when she was in utero, and she was very young. I don't even remember how young it was when she looked at me and she's like, "Dad, did you write this about me?" Like, yeah, I did. She just knew, and it's about a little baby bird that flies around meeting people, finding love wherever she goes, and learning to be confident and all the mantra kind of things that you want to instill in your kids. And
Yeah.
she realized it like that young, but I don't know. It's very interesting to see how these things progress. So since you have gotten out of college, you've been a professional musician, and it sounds
Yeah.
like an educator. Can you talk a little bit about you talk a little bit about your education? What have you done in the performing, recording, composing, that kind of realm?
I've been a little bit of everything. My career has been a real weird, long, strange trip.
Mm,
I got a dual degree in music and business, so my career has been kind of a mad mix of both.
mm,
And there have been time periods of my life when I wasn't performing. They
mhm.
also coincided with the deepest depressions that I've ever been in.
Yeah.
Um, and so the first, I performed a lot when I was in college. I started getting paid to perform when I was still in high school,
Mm,
and performed all through college as kind of a revenue generator for sure. And when I was in college, I used to play like in the Elks Club and in bars and places like that. And what's really funny is like in 1979, I made the same amount of money. In fact, I made more money in 1979 for a night of playing in a bar than I do now, which is just a tragic report on things. But um, when I was in college, I went to a Christian university in Indiana.
okay.
Let me back it up a little bit. I was told all through high school that I wasn't college material. So
Mm,
I did not make any plans for college. And what ended up happening was just a really beautiful twist of fate. And that is that about 3 weeks before school started, all of my friends were leaving town to go to college. And here I was, I didn't even have a decent job. I was delivering pianos and organs for a music store, um, you know, putting strings on guitars and things like that, making minimum wage. And I just didn't have any idea. And I had been told by guidance counselors that I wasn't college material. So I had always just kind of talked myself out of the idea.
mm,
About 3 weeks before college started, all my friends are leaving town, and I decided on a whim. There was a community college in Casper, wonderful school, and they happened to have one of the premier jazz programs in Wyoming.
mm.
And I went up and I talked to Dr. Tom Kinzer, who was the I'm gonna get choked up, man.
Okay.
There are just these random moments that define a life, and that was one of them.
Hmm.
But I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Kinzer, and I said, Dr. Kinzer, I'd like to I'd like to enroll in the program. And he said, well, I'd like to hear you play. So I went in and played, and I was the only guitar player that had auditioned for anything that knew any jazz chords. And he was the jazz band, instructor and jazz combos and all that kind of stuff. Um, and he gave me a scholarship, and that changed my life. And they gave me a Pell Grant, and that paid for my books for the first 3 years that I was in school. So in those 3 years, I was in 9 different performing groups that traveled the whole Northwest of the United States on recruiting tours and festivals and stuff like that. And so those are the kinds of moments that I had along the way that just propelled me toward a music career. I knew that I loved studio music. I loved being able to sit down and sight read and to make something happen immediately in the studio.
Mm.
And so my initial goal was, after I finished at Casper College, I decided what I really wanted to do was, I wanted to. My dog's going to bark now. I hope you can't hear that.
Just barely. You're good.
Okay. Well, after Casper College, I knew that I wanted to follow a studio music track. And I started to apply for there. At that time, there were 5 schools in the whole country that had programs that were oriented toward music business and studio musicianship
Hmm.
and recording. One was the University of Miami, one was Berkeley in Boston. There was another one called Full Sail out in Miami, and there was another that was just about recording that was in Chillicothe, Ohio. And there was one school in Indiana that was this tiny Christian school
Mm.
that happened to be affiliated with the church that I was attending at the time.
Mm.
And the pastor of the church said, "Hey, listen, I'm getting ready to go out to camp meeting." He says, "I want you to come with me, and I just want you to meet some people." And he introduced me to people in the music department at that school, and they had a brand new music business program. And I signed up for that, and I spent the next 3 years at Anderson College in Indiana
Mm.
trying to finish a bachelor's degree, which I finally did finish. Um, but what was really interesting to me, again, I got lots of great opportunities to perform. But what I found was that my skill level, as far as the studio musicians were concerned, my skill level was still, as good as it was still kind of mediocre compared to them.
Mm.
And so I was like a C player in an area where A and B players got most of the gigs. So
Mhm.
I would get the calls that would be for the midnight to 8 a.m. recording sessions, and they
Mhm.
were for like, um, this is a this is a church choir composer, and he's writing music for choirs that aren't very good. So
Mm.
we need to have a band on this one. So I would go in and record the demos and the accompaniment tracks for those choir pieces.
Mhm.
Not very interesting. But at the same time, I had gotten married, and the person that I was married to had initially thought it would be pretty cool to be married to a musician, but then the lifestyle took over, and we both found that it wasn't very amenable to the lifestyle that was desired. And so I put music aside for several years and started working in social services
Mm.
and worked as a counselor in a group home, and I worked as a gang intervention specialist, conflict resolution teacher, all these different things. And I got a lot of different training in those areas. At the same time, I was still doing some session work here and there. There was a studio that was just right down the street from our house, and every now and then he would call for something. But I always kind of kept my fingers in the recording part, and that was when I started to also learn how to do home recording. And I remember I had a little Yamaha 4-track cassette machine, learning how to do home recording.
Mhm.
And so I started to do demos and stuff like that as well. Now, during that time, I had also been, a little bit before that time, while I was finishing college, I was working and part owner of a small recording studio
Mm.
that did demos, jingles, all kinds of stuff like that. Well, this was in 1985, 86, and something had been introduced a couple of years prior to that that wiped out that level of opportunity for musicians, and it was called MIDI.
Yeah.
And synthesizers were just becoming just totally outrageous. Like the Yamaha DX7 had been introduced, and between MIDI and the DX7 and some of the ARP and Roland and Moog synthesizers that were now MIDI capable, one person could string together all of these synthesizers and have a symphony at their fingertips if they wanted to. So all of that jingle work and all of that, all of that radio work just went away. right.
Wow.
So as the technology developed, opportunities really shifted. Um,
Mm,
that first marriage ended, and I decided that the first thing that I was going to do was to buy a new amplifier and go play at a blues jam. So I just embraced the blues community in Indianapolis during that time,
mhm,
and met some really key people again who were very encouraging. But this was the point in my life when songwriting started.
mm,
And songwriting, when I found songwriting, it was as much, if not more, of a muse than the guitar had been when I was 13.
mm.
It was like, this is mine.
Yeah.
This is what I can do. And this is what I can be excellent at. So that was really, that discovery happened at a perfect time. So in 1996, I started to go down to Nashville and visit friends that lived down there. And I had wanted to move there when I was in college and become a studio musician, but I wasn't good enough for the studio. But I was a great songwriter, and I could go down there and co-write songs, and
Mm.
started to get some traction that way as well. But within a few months, I was actually just flat broke and had to get a job installing carpet at a Motel 6.
Yeah.
But all during that time, I was just improving my songwriting
Hmm.
and meeting a lot of songwriters. And I called those years, I was in Nashville for just over a year and a half. And I call that year and a half my graduate school experience because it
Hmm.
was there that I really learned the business.
Mm.
And at that point, I was ready to jump into something more full time.
Yeah. I've got quite a few friends that have moved to Nashville specifically to be in that scene and learn from
Yeah.
the different uh well, I mean, it's just a huge music community, so.
And it's actually a really small town.
Hmm.
That's the thing that I was just amazed by is that it didn't take long to meet a lot of people and everybody's connected to everybody else.
Hmm.
So it's like the 6 degrees of separation in Nashville turned down to about 2 degrees of separation if you've been there about a week.
So explain. So first of all, that's a amazing journey, and it's as just I had a lot to say during that time, but there is so much interesting content. The Having that type of someone believe in you is one of the most powerful things that you can ever experience. I mean, I think
Yeah,
this is one of what I would love for the people listening to take away from that experience is the fact that you did not listen to all of the people telling you that you weren't ready for college.
I
And you
did
went,
initially, but then I just decided to really check it out for myself.
yeah. I mean, that never happened to me in the academic realm. I was always highly accomplished there. But in business, that has happened repeatedly. People tell me there's no way this is going to work, or I will get involved if you do the things that I want you to do, or whatever it might be. And it's that part of that journey is what I thoroughly enjoy is the whole learning that everything that somebody tells you is just their opinion. And it's really interesting to be able to come to that realization of not even realization, but that necessary discernment to of what to adopt and what to not adopt as our
Yeah,
own. Yeah, and that's a very important. One of the things that music I think is very helpful in training us to do, because what we have to do as musicians is come into an extremely self-aware place so that our spirits with the breath, power through our mind, the physical element of our instrument or our voice, and those three things have to be completely synced. And when those three things are synced, and you're literally practicing things that are either in harmony or not in harmony or building up energy, decreasing energy, you start to notice these dynamics and these expressions in our everyday life.
yeah,
And that's what's so powerful about music to me is not even, I mean, I love playing music and I play every day a lot, but
yeah.
but it's the benefit that I get outside of that from realizing this is what is happening right now. And that is subconscious to a lot of people that don't have that experience of training themselves on this type of expression. So,
Yep.
yeah, I think that's very, very powerful. And then, um, this is so Nashville, that was in the mid 90s.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I've never spent a lot of time in Nashville. I drove through a couple times on my way to Bonnaroo. Have you heard of
Oh
Bonnaroo?
yeah, man.
I've been 3 times. I love
That's awesome.
it. Yeah, I drove along I-40 from LA out to Memphis to
Wow.
Tennessee twice, and then
You
once
took the
down to
long
New
trip.
York. Oh, that's where I was going to school, and we wanted to bring our weed.
Oh
So
yeah.
that was a
So
big
you
part
had
of
to
it.
drive. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been sober for 8.5 years now, so I just but I was like, yeah, we gotta drive out. And then one time I drove down from New York with my girlfriend, who I had flown out to hang out with over the summer. But the Nashville's small, and I mean, explain how you went about meeting different people.
Okay.
Even just from the very beginning, you get to a new place. Sounds like you've moved around quite a bit in your
Yeah.
life. You get to a new place, and as a musician, you need a community if you're gonna,
Yes.
So how do you go about that process every time you get to a new location?
Well, there are a couple of things. When I moved to Nashville, the first day that I lived there, I went to ASCAP and I met a guy, may he rest in peace, Ralph Murphy.
Okay.
And Ralph, he was one of these guys that he worked for ASCAP. He was the first front end guy that everybody met when they first through the ASCAP doors. And
Mhm.
Ralph every Wednesday morning would have a class on. So now you're in Nashville. Now what? Um, and he would take everybody's tapes and he would listen to the tapes and then he would get back in touch with you and make recommendations for you as to who you needed to know.
Wow.
And the first person that he recommended that I meet is a woman who's still doing it out there. Her name is Debbie Champion, and Debbie hosted songwriters nights. The place where she was working at that time was a place called the Broken Spoke,
Hmm.
and it was in the cafe at the Ramada Inn on Trinity Lane,
Yeah.
and it was just like they had a writers' night, I think 5 nights a week or something like that, and then they had writers' showcases on Fridays and Saturdays.
Hmm.
So I was introduced to Debbie Champion through Ralph, and I went to as many writers' nights at the Broken Spoke as I could go to.
Hmm.
And Debbie also hosted a writers' night at an old bookstore there called the Davis Kid Bookstore, which was actually a really great night. A lot of movers and shakers would show up for that.
Nice.
I got one opportunity to play a writers' night at the Bluebird, which was a feather in my cap, and it was really interesting that there was another writer who was actually scheduled for that night, and she called and asked me if I wanted the slot, and I said, "Well, can't you play it?" And she said, "No." She says, "I can play it, but I want you to." And it was like, wow, that said a lot to me right there.
Mhm.
Bless God, bless Mary, wherever she is. Um, and so Debbie Champion probably introduced me to more people than anybody else in that town.
Mhm.
I had some college friends that had moved down there, and they were working primarily in the Christian music industry.
Mhm.
And one of them was a music leader for Lee Greenwood. I went to college with Stephen Curtis Chapman, and so I had gotten in touch with a lot of those guys again, just to find out what they were doing and to, you know, see if they could kind of help me get connections. And there were some good co-writing relationships that grew from my college connections as well.
Mhm.
So when I moved to Nashville, that was my strategy. It was just like I wanted to meet people. I wanted to get as immersed in the scene as I could.
Mhm.
So for about the first 6 months, I had enough money to live on, so I could just go to writers' nights every night of the week and meet new people. And then during the day, I'd write songs with people, and then I would try those new songs out at a writers' night just to see how they were received.
Mhm.
I never got anything published and I never got anything recorded while I was living there. But I learned the business and I learned that that kind of songwriting probably wasn't what I wanted to do most. But I found that the songwriting that I was doing and the training that I was getting by playing for all of these writers' nights started to define what my next step was going to be, and
Hmm.
that was to be a performing songwriter.
Yeah.
And that's really where that started for me, was in Nashville. And as I said, I was installing carpet at the Motel 6. There was one day in particular that stands out in my memory and that I wrote a song about that became the title song of my album. It's called Falling All the Way. And that day, the Motel 6 didn't have any air conditioning on because they were being remodeled. The air conditioning was off. It was 105 degrees outside and it was 130 degrees inside.
Wow.
And we had to have the windows closed because there was a pack of stray dogs that was running around the hotel, and if they smelled food, they would jump through the screen. So it was 105 degrees. There was a tornado warning, and there actually that was the day in 1990. It's probably 97 when a tornado went right through downtown Nashville.
Hmm.
And I just remember the rest of the crew left to go get more carpet or something like that. And I remember just bursting into tears saying, this cannot be what my life is from now on.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the moment where I just realized that I was open to anything, but I couldn't continue. I couldn't continue doing that because my body was starting to break down. My emotions were starting to take their toll. And I was still staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning every night going to writers' nights and
Yeah.
trying to still be immersed in the scene. This was the early days of AOL.
Hmm.
I met a person in an AOL chat who was a dancer, and she was kind of connected to the Cajun and Zydeco scene in the Washington, D.C. area. But she also knew a lot of musicians there, and she said, "Why don't you come up for the weekend? There are 2 concerts and there's a music party, and I just want to introduce you to people. I want you to, just see what's going on here and see what you think." So I went up there that weekend, and um, by the time that weekend was over, I had met 2 songwriters who had invited me to be their lead guitar player. I had been offered a job in a music store, and I had gone to a music party where I started to meet other people who were playing the kind of music that I loved.
Mm.
And I knew that I had to go to that area. And so within a month, I had made the move up to DC.
Nice.
And I lived there for another 13 years. Um, that was the first place and time when I was able to actually go full time in music.
Hmm.
Between working in the music store, teaching guitar lessons, and performing, I was doing music all the time. And so that was the first place where I was able to start to do that. And I also opened my own recording service during that time, and all that happened during DC. So that was kind of the realization of my long held dream.
Well, and what's the style of music that you loved that was up there?
There was a lot of old time fiddle music. There was a lot of traditional music. Like Washington has just a vast kind of traditional folk scene, and they have Celtic, they have Cape Breton, they have uh, you know every manner of traditional music. It was a bluegrass center. It's also known as the Telecaster town. People like John Fahey were from that area, and Roy Buchanan, the Telecaster master, Danny Gatton, all of those guys were from that area. So
Mm.
the music scene there is just absolutely rich and varied and diverse. Everything from bluegrass to punk to go-go to hardcore. Like Henry Rollins and Dave Grohl are both from that area.
Mm.
Both from that area, and it's just a rich music scene. I think it's an It's one of the most well-kept secrets in the U.S. about how cool that music scene really is.
Mm,
And I was just steeped in it for years.
nice.
You know.
Yeah. Do you think that has anything to do with the politics?
No, because the politics there are transient.
Mm,
I think the people who are involved in the music scene there, they either were raised there
hmm
or they're bureaucrats and they've lived there for a very long time and they need something to do to break the monotony of their jobs.
mm,
And music and art and culture is what they do.
yeah. Interesting. So, so DC, and that was late 90s. And
Yep.
then what did you do between that and where you are now in Colorado?
Well, in DC, I did music full time until about I released my first CD a week after 9/11 happened. Some of my guitar students were actually in the Pentagon at the time that it was hit.
Whoa.
And so my CD release party was on September 17th of 2001. And we weren't even sure if we were going to be able to have a CD release party.
hmm
And I had a dual release with one of my musical partners, Mary Sue Tui, also released a CD that same night. But we had a full house at the Unitarian Church in Silver Spring,
Mm,
and it was a fantastic evening. My parents were able to fly out at that time. We weren't sure if they were going to be able to attend, but they both were able to fly out and be
hmm
there. In 2003, I got married again, and we had a little girl, and her name was Sarah. And Sarah was born with some pretty severe complications, a chromosomal disorder. And she only lived to be 10 days old. And that was really the first, I was maybe 41 years old at that point,
hmm
and that was the beginning of the most difficult and challenging decade of my life.
Yeah.
Um, the day after, the day after my CD release party, I had a musical partner. It wasn't Mary Sue. I had another musical partner that we were actually getting ready to go out and do some road work. And she called me the day after my concert and said she didn't want to go on the road with me. And I had been actually making my next year and a half plans to go on tour. And so here I was. I had just bought a new van and was getting ready to go on tour. We had dates and everything like that. And now I had absolutely nothing. I had a big goose egg. I had
Yeah.
nothing on my calendar except for guitar lessons. So for the next couple of years, I just enjoyed, I enjoyed playing when I could, but taught a lot of guitar lessons and did that.
hmm
2001 or 2003, I got married again, and we had our baby, and she left the building. And then in 2005, our son was born,
hmm
and he's a strapping young man. He's a drummer, by the way.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah,
The
way into
best.
metal,
Yeah.
way into metal. We've got a lot of metal things coming up. But
Cool.
um, but in 2005, when he was born, I was really at the peak of my own music career, doing a lot. I was teaching 4 days a week, pretty much full time,
Wow.
and I was gigging 2 to 3 nights a week all
hmm
over the Mid Atlantic and up into New England. Um, and in 2006, I started to develop tendonitis from my wrists to my shoulders and both arms.
Oh no.
And it was just repetitive motion injury, and it was excruciating. And I had to stop playing altogether.
Mm.
And then about in 2007, I started to have symptoms of my organs shutting down.
Mm.
And I didn't have insurance. So I didn't have the ability to seek very good treatment at that time. So by the time 2008 rolled around, I was deathly ill and was in congestive heart failure and ended up being hospitalized over the next 2 years 6 times.
Wow.
And my music career at that point, I just thought it was over.
hmm
But one of the things that started to happen during that time was that I started to discover, first of all, e commerce. And all
So
these
there's the tech side of things came in.
all these kinds of digital kinds of things that were just so exciting.
Mhm.
2007, before my tendonitis had gotten so bad that I couldn't play at all, I recorded some of the earliest online courses for guitar,
Nice.
beginning guitar, and I think they're still up on YouTube. They're pretty ridiculous, but um, and I did another series on basic home recording that was just ridiculous. But that was my introduction to online courses. That was my introduction during that time to blogging. And in conjunction with one of the blogs, I started my first podcast while I was in the midst of that sickness.
You were early on
Uh,
in the podcasting world, huh?
the podcast started in around 2010,
Yeah.
so it was still like a shoestring held together with chewing gum and shoelaces. It was like it was not the process that it is today.
Yeah.
And then uh, as my hospitalizations got worse, I had to have a major surgery in 2010. And it was during that time that I realized that I really wanted to get closer to my family again.
Hmm.
And so we decided to move back to the Colorado, Wyoming area.
Mm.
And so in 2011, after I had regained my health or gotten back to at least a stable point in my health,
Hmm.
um, I was able to start playing again. And I wanted to find a place that had a pretty strong acoustic music scene, and I wanted to find a place that was close enough to my parents and my other family members that I
Hmm.
just didn't feel so isolated from them. So we moved back to Colorado then.
Mm.
We've been in Colorado ever since.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. And so I'm glad that you came out of that time healthy.
Yeah,
And so are you still in tech now doing e-commerce and podcasting and doing all
yeah.
blogs and
Well, another random happy accident in my life was that during the time that I was sick, there were people that were kind of coming out of my woodwork saying, "Can you help me start a career in a creative direction?" Some of them were musicians, some of them were artists, some of them were authors, some of them were, just people who were like wanting to do creative things and move
Mhm.
into a career that you know was centered on that. And I said, "Sure, I'm happy to help you."
Mhm.
And the defining moment was the night that I had surgery. I was in intensive care, and that night um, I had a good friend who was the hospital chaplain, and he came in to visit me that night after my surgery. And I had been on these great painkillers. They just had given me a little button, and anytime that I wanted it, I could just push the button and get a little bit more juiced. Well, he
Mhm.
came in and we just started talking, and I was feeling no pain at all. And we just started talking, and I was okay, so he was feeling okay about it. He didn't feel like that he needed to give me any spiritual guidance as the chaplain, but he also happened to be a songwriter, and I knew him from that.
Mhm.
We ended up talking about his career for the next 2 hours and
Mhm.
about the desire that he had to actually kind of go part-time into music and what that would look like. And I remember at the end of that conversation when he left, I was so wired that I couldn't sleep. And here I was on a morphine drip, and
That's saying a lot.
I could not sleep. I was just so jazzed by what had happened in that moment.
Mhm.
And at some point, somebody wanted to pay me for that, and I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, what you're doing is coaching." And I said, "No, this isn't coaching. I've been around coaching. That's what executives do. That's what Tony Robbins does. This
Yeah.
isn't coaching. This is just a friend helping a friend."
Mhm.
But that registered with me, and at some point I realized this is a possibility for me. And
Mm.
that night in the hospital was really kind of another bellwether moment where that defined a trajectory for me that has still continued now. That's been the trajectory that I've been on. It was kind of a dual path for several years as I was doing music and coaching and e-commerce at the same time,
Mm.
all three. But about 2 years ago, I had just gotten to the point with music where I was tired. I was exhausted. And it had gotten harder and harder and harder. My health wasn't great at the time. Um, and still working on getting my health back in some kind of order. But I just realized that I was really hurting myself. I had played 2 gigs in 100-degree heat. One of them had been in direct sunlight, and about
Mm.
halfway through the first set, I almost keeled over. And I
Wow.
realized that at that point that I was actually putting myself in danger to play music.
Yeah.
And that was a real come to Jesus moment for me.
Hmm.
And I had one more gig on the books that summer, August of 2022. And it was a big downtown gig with some of the best players in the area. And I decided that that was going to be my last one.
Wow.
And so I haven't looked back.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I mean, I've had health issues related to drug and alcohol use that was like, okay, I gotta stop
Yeah.
uh doing this, and I didn't play music for a while after that. But uh yeah, I mean, you gotta take care of yourself first. It's like I think health is the most important thing, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then the people around us have to take care of us, and we can't take care of them. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's very important. And sometimes, like mine was based off of my choices. Sometimes we don't have a choice. Sometimes we just get unhealthy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's really hard for musicians is that the lifestyle can get unhealthy quick.
Yeah.
And we really have to guard against habits that are to our detriment. We really have
Oh,
to
yeah.
guard against that.
So, with the few minutes that we have left here, my question is, you've got such a long history, great experience. What would be one thing you'd want to share with aspiring musicians that you wish you had known when you started your musical journey?
Well, that's a good question. And the one thing that I want to say that's kind of in the context of the theme of this podcast
Hmm.
is that when I retired from performing, I regained my love for practicing.
Mm.
And what's really cool is that I am now in a similar place that that 13-year-old kid was in his bedroom after school playing the guitar for hours at a time,
Yeah.
where I'm just doing it because it's fun
Hmm.
and it feels good. And the practice is cool,
Yeah.
right? So one of the things that I'm hopeful for people who are engaged in music at any level in their lives is that they don't lose sight of the fun of it, and that I think there are 3 areas of music that I have benefited from, and I can only acknowledge them in hindsight, but I wish I would have known more about them earlier. And one of them is that the practice of music is as powerful as meditation or prayer as a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting down and you're playing a tune repetitively, you get into the same present space as if you were going into a deep level of meditation or
Mm.
contemplative prayer, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the things that I recognized on hindsight, but it happened early on. I mean, it would happen when I was practicing my Mel Bay book, or my
Hmm.
John Denver songs. It's like I would disappear into the background,
Hmm.
and the only thing that was going on was was music and presence,
Yeah.
and it was magical. It was just absolutely transcendent.
Yeah.
The second thing that I wish that I would have, the second thing that I wish I would have done really didn't have as much to do with music as it did with personality. But I was a very timid person, and I
Mm.
was not very assertive, and I wish that I would have been more assertive. Um, because I feel like that if had I been a more assertive person, that my music trajectory would have taken a much different path. And I would have probably advocated for myself more strongly in situations where I actually kind of abdicated to people because I thought they were smarter than me.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third thing that I would say, and I'm going to paraphrase James Taylor: practice every day and avoid a major drug habit.
Yeah, I
I
can
think
attest to that.
I think that's some of the most the most incredible professional music wisdom that anybody could ever hear is those two things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you hit the nail on the head about the reason behind this podcast and the business in general. Practicing musician, not performing, not famous, not anything. You don't have to have natural talent. You don't have to be a certain age. You said some of your favorite students are adult beginners,
Yeah,
right? Like the point is to practice. And when people think, oh, music practice, blah, 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 takes so long. Well, you look at literally people going into careers in medicine and law, and they're practicing their entire career. It's
yeah, right.
practice medicine. I'm gonna practice my law practice, so it's just, I think that that's really key to understand. And I love the practicing component so much, just diving in deeper and deeper into the subtleties, like you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the English, learning English as a second language or any language. But it's like I can form these sentences and then I can understand the words, but getting into those subtleties, the conjugations or whatever it might
Yeah, the
be,
nuances.
the nuances. It's so beautiful, and it's a never-ending uh, knowledge base that we can tap into and continue to learn from. So, thank you so much for sharing all of that you shared. I'd love to get you back on the podcast. We have
Sure.
so many more questions. I have so many more questions, but I have
Oh
so much
man.
more I planned out, and it was so interesting to hear about that your whole trajectory. You've been a part of music for such a long period of time. I think it's really important for people to understand that this really is something that you can do. And I love what you said, or just want to bring it back again. I love what you said about now that you're not performing, you get to practice.
Yeah,
That's amazing, and
it's a beautiful thing,
oh yeah.
and I've regained the love of it.
Hmm.
Just the love, the pleasure of it has come back in spades. It's just so cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. So to close this out, I mentioned at the beginning some places people can find you. Do you want to mention anything else? Yeah,
Sure.
what would you like to share with people? Where can they find
Well, um, my music website is down right now, so I'm not even going to encourage people to go look at that. My one album that I've ever released is available on all the streaming services, but I don't play those songs anymore.
you?
Um, and I don't know what I'm going to do with music from here on out, so that remains to be seen. My blog, which includes all of my podcast episodes and all the weird things that I think about and all the weird things that I talk about, is franklintaggart.com. And that's kind of my permanent address, and people can find me there easily. The things that I've been working on most recently have been some courses, in particular for coaches, that are all about jumping into the online video platforms and
Mm,
making the most out of them. So I work with a lot of people who are a little bit camera shy and a little bit technophobic and a little bit on the side of feeling really lost in the wilderness when it comes to content marketing or anything like that.
yeah. Yeah. Well, check out Franklin. Clearly a very approachable, kind man. So if
Yeah.
you're in the need of any help with your careers, definitely reach out to him. And thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to our next conversation.
Well, Jake, thanks for what you're doing. This is an important thing.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right.